celebrating the storytellers who widen our horizons. Authors on the Air. Why write?
Oh, well, I'm a teacher by trade. I taught third and fourth grade for years, and I was an instructional coach, and I was a Title I reading coordinator. So, reading and writing, it's in my blood anyway, and at least in the teaching form of it. But I've always loved to read and write, and I've really felt like I had the story to tell. And so one day I closed up my classroom for summer break, bought a journal, and started writing The Way to Silence, and tucked it away. I finished the first draft before I got my classroom ready for the new school year, and I tucked it away and brought it out at winter break when teachers can come up for air again. And I thought I needed to figure out what I was going to do with it. And I started looking into the whole publishing process because it was something I was not familiar with at all. And eventually ended up with Park Row, Mira and Park Row.
That for a first attempt, that is an outstanding story.
It's, right place, right time. I was fortunate enough to find an agent who really loved the book. And she worked with me for a year and a half to get The Way to Silence in good shape, much better shape. And after that, she decided it was ready to send out to publishers. And then it took another year and a half to land a publisher. And I've been writing ever since.
For those who don't know what this story is about, give us the Wiley pitch.
Sure, yeah. So The Overnight Guest is about Wiley Lark. She's a true crime author who comes to this old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, to finish her current project, which is about a true crime that took place in that very community, in that same house decades before. And so she's settled into the old house. It's the middle of winter. She's working away on her book. And of course, the blizzard of the century hits. And she knows that she's going to be snowed in for a while. She opens up her front door to let her dog out and discovers a child in the snow who's nearly frozen. And there's no one else around. There's no adult, nothing to say where this child came from. So, of course, she brings the child into the house, and they don't really mesh quite well at first, and they're trying to figure each other out. The child's not saying where they came from and what's going on. But Wiley quickly realizes that they're not so isolated as they thought they were. In the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this blizzard, somebody will do anything to get inside that house. And then interwoven with that story is the actual crime story that Wiley has written that chronicles the crime that took place 20 years before in that same house. So interspersed with Wiley's story is exactly what happened, what the crime was, how it affected the community, the family members, the police investigation, and then interwoven with that is another third perspective that I don't like to say a lot about, but once the three storylines collide, it all makes sense.
You do a great job going back and forth between present day and flashback.
Thank you.
How do you pull that off?
Oh, I don't know. I really, I knew I needed to tell this story in three perspectives, because of the different timelines, but also, to get in the minds of the characters where they're at in that period of time. And so I started out with the flashback scenes first. And I wrote as far as I could with those. I had a very clear picture in my mind of what the crime was, Didn't know exactly where it was going to go. Didn't even exactly know who done it. I had an idea, but that always changes as I write. And I wrote as far as I could there, and then I went back and started working on the Wiley present day scenes and dispersing those throughout. And the third perspective really came fully to me when I was nearly done with the book. I had bits of it in there, but it took that long for me to really discover how I wanted to tell that part of the story.
They say that there's a little bit of us in every character at some place, some point. How much of you is in Wiley?
Oh, goodness. We're both writers. I've always wanted to write about have a character be a true crime writer. I'm kind of obsessed with true crime. All the podcasts, all the documentaries, the Datelines, the true crime books, but I'm a fiction writer. But on the page, I got to play a true crime writer. So that was kind of fun. And I would say that's pretty much where, our similarities end. But, she's absolutely, driven. She got a mind of her own. I guess we have those things in common too. I guess. But she's a unique, complex character.
How do you build your characters?
Slowly, but, I get a notebook. I always have a notebook, and I tab sections, and I'll label each section with a character's name. And then I'll start brainstorming, what they look like, what they sound like, their history, their loves, their hate. And some of it sticks and, gets in the book. Others don't make it into the book, but it still helps me get to know them a little bit better. But it takes time, as you develop a character, because Wiley is kind of, she very much isolated herself and is, I don't know if she would call her an open person or a very pleasant person even. She's just trying to do her job, and she doesn't want to make connections with anybody. And so as I wrote her, at first I kind of made her a little too friendly. And I'm like, oh, that wouldn't be her. That wouldn't be the way she would react. And especially to this, even though it's a child, this stranger coming into her domain, so made her a little more prickly as I got to know her.
What do your fans like most about the way that you write?
I don't know. I hope, I really hope that they like the fact that I, create these really typical, regular, everyday characters who are just kind of thrust into these very strange, dangerous circumstances and, take them for a ride and a bit of an escape. And, I do write dark, thrillers, mysteries. But I also really try, because some of the subject matter I write about is hard and dark, but I really hope there's like an infusion of hope in there too. So I think readers really appreciate that there's a light at the end of the tunnel for the characters, that there's something beyond, the trauma or the difficulties that they faced in the pages of my book, that there's something out there better.
What's the appeal of the dark side to you?
People ask me that all the time, because they, I was a third grade teacher, for goodness sake. You have to be peppy and happy, and I am, I think. But I've always loved mysteries and scary shows and scary books. And one of my favorite memories, is I still do this with my dad. But we would, back in the day when we had 3 or 4 channels, is all maybe Friday nights, there'd be like the mystery movie on one of the stations, and we would sit down and watch that together. And, as I grew, we liked a lot of the same books, mysteries and thrillers, and would share those back and forth, and still do. So I think that's where it came from. And I think with that as well, though, I must say, I grew up in Iowa. I was 12 years old, the same time that Johnny Gosh, if you've heard that story of the paper boy in Des Moines who was kidnapped from his route, and we were the same age, and that absolutely terrified me and intrigued me because here I, was the same age, following this on the news. It was everywhere. Parents really started to become really concerned about where your kid was and be home. And it just, my childhood kind of changed that there from this really one of innocence where we would run around all hours of the day till it was dark out. Maybe our parents knew where we were, to where the parents were getting much more protective of where their kids were. And, I grew up and, Johnny didn't come home, and that has always stuck with me. And so I think that mystery and, the heartbreak of that really stuck with me through the years. So I often include children in my books and have their perspective included as well.
We all dream of being New York Times #1 best-selling authors. How did you do it?
It was amazing. I really don't know, again, that right time, right place kind of thing. And the book really resonated with booksellers and readers. And I can't explain it. I really can't explain it, but it was just a thrill of a lifetime.
How do you promote?
It's really changed over the years. When I first started, there was some on things on Facebook, that was around. But I didn't do a whole lot, because I didn't know what to do. And I was working, and you just did what you could and tried to set up events and go to events that your publisher set up. But especially now with the pandemic, when we were all at home, we've been at home for a couple years now, really. That's when the online presence became even more important, I think, and we kind of are flooded with it. But, I really reached out to other authors, and we started doing some fun book events online and book things. I currently do because I really missed connecting with readers, and I'm a huge reader, and I wanted to connect with other authors. So during the pandemic, I started this fun little series called Sidekicks and Side Trips, where I interviewed authors about their pets, their sidekicks, and really short, fun videos asking them questions like, if your pet could describe you in 3 words, what would they say? Yeah. Or if you were in a dark alley and it's just you and your pet and someone comes along, who would protect who? And then, of course, we talk about their book and what they're reading. But it was a really nice way to get a short snippet, a short look into a different aspect of an author's life. And then I realized there were so many authors that I wanted to talk to that didn't have pets. So I added a side trip aspect to it, where I asked them about something that they're passionate about beyond writing. And it's been really fun. So I've talked to authors who are real advocates for mental health, authors who really are into design and bike riding and baking. And so it's just been a really fun way to connect with other authors. And now I'm doing a fun little series with 2 other authors, Kara Ruda and Kimberly Bell, called Killer Author Club, where we invite thriller writers to come talk with us, and we have a killer cocktail and do killer giveaways and ask them, who do you kill, how do you kill, why do you kill, fictionally, of course. Yeah. And so that's another way to try and keep readers engaged with, writers that we love, and with us, to have those conversations, because there's nothing better than talking about books.
How do you know when you're successful in this business?
I don't know if you ever know. Don't you think it's just an industry full of ups and downs? And you just don't know. You just, for me, what I've learned, because like, the ups and downs, accolades come and go, good book reviews, more negative book reviews. People like your book, they don't like your book. Some projects are harder than others. And one thing I've really learned over the years, if you write the books that you want to read, that helps you get through all of that. Because when it's down to it, it's you and the page, you and your computer, and you and your story. And if you don't love the story, you might not always like the story, but if you don't love the story and the work you're doing with it, it's hard. It can be really hard.
When are you happiest as a writer?
Oh gosh. The happiest time for me is when I, have settled on an idea and I go to Target or Staples and I get all my new school supplies, like my Post-it notes and my notebooks, and I'm starting to draft the book.
Yeah.
And, and brainstorm and, just start fleshing things out. That is my favorite time because there's just so many possibilities and, and I really try to approach my first draft as there are no mistakes. You just go. So that's my favorite time.